Hey guys, Chad Hoover, Kayak Bass Fishing. Welcome to today's video, and I'm going to be twisting this guy's arm again. If you didn't see the last video, check the link in the description box where he shares his secrets for fishing tournaments. But we'll be talking to him today about his favorite lures for being successful when tournament fishing. All right, so Cody, in our last video, you talked about tournament success, eliminating water temperature, bait fish, forage. But you mentioned something in the video that I knew we would have to delve into as a completely separate video. And again, if you guys haven't seen that video yet, be sure to check out the description box. I'll put the link below. Cody dropped a lot of knowledge in that video. So if you're just watching this video, this is Cody Milton at Kodiak on Instagram. Y'all go follow him. But he is the 2018 Kayak Bass Fishing Angler of the Year and started it off 2019 with the bang, winning the KBF DZ, the 10. The 10 is probably the most prestigious event in kayak fishing, I think. You know, it's the top 10 anglers in the world from the year before converging on one body of water, fishing against each other for 2 days. And you came out on top. So congrats again on that. But you said something in that video about I could have fished out of a brown paper bag. You got to fish with confidence lures. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What would have been in that brown paper bag last year if you could only fish the lures in that brown paper bag? And when did you fish them? Where did you fish them? And why did you fish them? So we're not going to call it your top 3, your top 5. What lures is in Cody Milton's brown paper bag?
So the main one was definitely have been a 11/16 hardhead by Jen LaRue. That it does great in the spring. It does great when fish are out deep, holding on ledges and things of that nature. I think I at least cashed 3 or 4 checks solely throwing that last year. And the other one.
Now explain what that is to the folks that might not know, and we'll go out to your truck in a minute and rifle through it and grab some of your stuff. But what exactly is that lure, and how do you fish it? In
my opinion, it's the modern day Carolina rig. I dropped a Carolina rig pretty much whenever the biffle bugs came out. It's a structure jig. It's a swinging. It's a swing head jig. It gives the bait a little more action, but also you feel the bottom a lot
better. An articulating jig for the folks that don't know exactly what a structure jig is, but yeah.
I mean, they're unreal. Like I said earlier, you can test the bottom in them really fast because they get down so fast, and you can fish them really quickly.
And what weight are you fishing?
11/16 and a 1 ounce.
Okay.
I actually throw the 1 ounce a lot, mainly when I'm deep, but I also do it because it has the bigger hook on it, so I can throw the 5-inch bug on that one.
And so you're pairing that with the biffle bug?
I am, yep.
So why that over a traditional Texas rig, and why that over a traditional jig?
I can't fish them fast enough. Sometimes I call it like bulldozing a 1 ounce jig. I will do that a lot, but I don't think the hookup ratio is as good as it is on a bug. I mean, if you stick them on a bug, I mean, you're pretty well getting them in.
Do you think sometimes people don't fish a jig or a crawfish bait? I grew up in Louisiana, so I've seen crawfish swimming a lot. And when they're really slow and they're really lethargic, they're really slow and they're really lethargic. In fact, they'll back up and they'll raise their claws up and they won't move. And I've seen brim grab them like a bulldog and shake them and tear them apart. But when they're ready to get on down the road, they're going, they're covering water and they dart and it's poof, poof, poof. You know what I mean? And that's what the fish are used to seeing is they kick up silt every time, but they might kick their tail and move that far. And then kick their tail again. So that fish is used to seeing, poof, 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 and they got to get on it if they want to catch them. So I think a lot of times, especially when you're fishing faster, or if you're fishing in a reaction bite scenario, you force the bite by fishing it a little faster. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Now, color. You've said in a couple videos and a couple of conversations that I've had with you, you're not a big color guy. Do you consider color as a factor at all?
I mainly try to match the bottom. Even if the water clarity's dirty, I don't really mind throwing a brown biffle bug. I mean, the only one I threw all year was a green pumpkin. Probably the only one anybody hardly buys now. So.
Now, you say you match the bottom. See, I'm a big fan of contrast in the bottom. If I'm on milfoil or hydrilla, and that's that brown, green, or orange, I want to go with a darker brown, a pumpkin, a dark pumpkin seed, depending on, because some manufacturers call pumpkin seed green, some of them call it brown, some call it pumpkin seed green and pumpkin seed brown. I'm a big fan of, if I've got green bottom, I'll go to a black lure. If I've got a sand bottom, then I'll go more natural or clear. But that's interesting that you said, because pumpkin seed really is that kind of middle of the road, and it's going to do well in anything out there. So, hey, it worked for him. So who am I to say exactly? But I'm a big fan of contrast. And a lot of times I'm sight casting, so I like to be able to see my lure. not so much just the white lure on the bed kind of angle where you don't see it anymore so you know they got it, but I like to see it. And I can see the contrast, how fast I'm moving it, what it's doing, and then a lot of times to see when the fish comes up behind it. So I'm not a big color guy either, you know what I mean? I've got relationships with lure companies that go, hey Chad, for the last 15 orders you've placed, you've ordered the same 2 colors and the same 3. Do you mind if we send you 18 other colors? I'm like, I mean, you could, but I don't really get too wrapped around the axle on color. I'm more of a contrast guy. I like a darker bait in darker water, and brown is definitely darker. I like a little bit lighter, more natural color bait in clearer water, and I kind of keep it simple when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, you know, I tend to agree. All right, so that's your first one. What's next? What else is in the bag?
The second one, and definitely when we kind of made the northern swing last year, it was the accent buzzbait, the Jacob Wheeler 3/16 buzzbait, and I plucked the skirts off of them and just put a little horny toad on the back of them. And it's what did it for me last year going up north too. I don't know if it's necessarily as much true now as it used to be.
But going up north when? What time of year were you up north?
Usually June, July, whenever, you know, that's mainly when most of the trail series and stuff head up this way. They're in ice, you know, now most of the time. So
somewhere in that 65 to 75 degree water temperature.
Yep. And it's kind of, you know, a buzzbait's an old bait, like a spinnerbait's an old bait. But I swear when you get up north around fish that don't see that as much, it's like it was as good as it was in the 80s or 90s. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I love recycling baits and I like recycling old good water. So
what color? Does color matter for you? Blade color? Profile?
If it's like the tannic and kind of a little darker, I like gold blades. I really like gold blades on a spinnerbait and on a buzzbait with a black frog. If shad spawn, obviously I do like the silver blade accent better with a little white frog on the back. But man, they're killer. They come out of the package squeaking. They really do. So.
You don't do any of the hang it off your rearview mirror thing?
Sometimes.
Any of the extra seasoning?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I definitely used to do it a lot. But you really don't have to as much.
I'll tell you one trick that nobody does anymore, and you know everybody knows about hanging it off your rearview mirror and letting the wind blow it and season it and all this other thing. But you can legitimately just take a pair of needle nose pliers, go right in behind it and squeeze it and spin the shaft, and it scores the shaft. Mm-hmm. And at least until it wears that scoring off, that grooving, it's going to have a different little characteristic. And you can even tweak the back of the blade. You know what I mean? Just bend it a little bit where it creates a little more friction and it creates that eek, eek, eek. And man, that high-pitched squeal, yeah. I think is the difference. It's what does it.
Put those in the box
and I'm a big fan of gold. I actually like to do a blinker thing too. I like to take matte black paint one side of a blade, and it creates this blink, 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 and it makes it harder for the fish to track it, makes them more aggressively attack it. You still got your contrast of your skirt or your frog or your, I like to use a lot of times, even on the smaller ones, especially the one that you mentioned, a twin tail grub from Yamamoto. It's a little more weight. It gets it down there, and it creates that little, you know, perfect action. It's repeatable, and man, does it give it a little bit of, oh yeah. So anyway, just little stuff like that, and even taking like a Kitech or you know a Seismic or a Strike King, swim bait, and just feeding them onto the bait and using that little bit of extra thump from the tail and that profile is just phenomenal. All right, so recap where we're at so far. We're 2 lures in, okay? 2, yep. So what's your first one?
The Bifflebug by Jen LaRue, and the 3/16 finesse accent Jacob Wheeler buzzbait.
All right, so dig deeper in the bag. What we got next?
The next. You know, it's one I really hate mentioning, but there was a big tournament on it.
Because it probably don't fit in the brown paper bag, right?
We'll get to that one.
Oh, okay, cool. So what's the next one?
The next one is actually the Zoom G-tail worm. I've been throwing that worm for a long, long time. And a lot of people probably know Rick Clunn won a really big tournament on the St. Johns River with it. It's not a ribbon tail worm. I really hate ribbon tail worms. And it's not a straight tail worm. It's a slow thumping worm. And it's a swimming worm too. I fish it as a topwater as much as I do like you would just regularly throw like a D-bomb out. But I can't get them right now because they're pretty much out of stock everywhere just after Rick Clunn's win. But they're an amazing worm, especially if you get it anywhere in Florida. Florida strain in general like them more because they don't move like the ribbon tail does. It's a lot slower and more subtle.
Okay. All right, what's next?
The next would have to be, like what you were kind of alluding to earlier, it would be the Hog Farmster Harvester rig. And depending on, it's an Alabama rig with 7 different hooks and like 8 different blades. So it's a big Alabama rig.
So you don't like those worms, right, like that?
I don't as much.
See that right there? I'll tell you what, I'm not a big fan of the small ribbon tail worms. I'm going to 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I would prefer to have a cut tail. I would prefer to have a hook. I'd prefer to make it myself. You know, I take worms and glue them together and make my own worms and do some hybrid stuff. But bro, them big girls, when they are either just recovering post-spawn and they've moved out to the staging area, or when they've gone lethargic and they're deep in the middle of the summer, I love dragging a big old obnoxious 1 ounce, 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce weight, deep, finding that deep cover and bump it up. And then I like the fact that that ribbon tail worm just is gonna because the weight hit the bottom first, and that tail, as it falls, it's just got a lot of action. And then all I gotta do is just barely hop it, and it starts the whole process over. And it gets in their face and just it just says, you're gonna eat me eventually. I like to yo-yo it on deep cover and deep structure, or cover on structure. So I agree 1,000,000% with the sole exception of dog days of summer, dead of winter, when I'm putting a giant, and when I say giant, I'm talking 12 to 16 inch worm. I even use the big coach whips and just put it right in their face and let it just dance. And it looks like an eel. It looks like something that they're gonna ultimately eat. But I've caught some giants on ribbon tails. So don't completely remove ribbon tails from your arsenal. So all right, so you got the ribbon tail, you've got the biffle bug, you've got the accent buzz bait, and then you're talking about now the umbrella or the Alabama rig. And the one thing that you have to keep in mind is check your local regulations, because they're different everywhere. Different agencies define what a lure is. Some say the lure is the actual lure with the hook in it. Some say the actual bait's a lure. So be very careful, because you can get in trouble in a hurry when it comes to using those 7 hook and those 5 hook combinations. Especially the further north you go, it seems like the crazier the restrictions are. But they are pretty good in the South too. For example, in Tennessee, we have a 5 lure and 3 hook law. You know what I mean? So you can have up to 5 lures, but you can only have 3 hooks. You know, so that's be sure that you check your local regulations. Don't just listen to what this guy said and go out there with a 7 hook setup and end up commenting on our video that you got a $400 fine or whatever it is. So, all right, so talk about that lure. Where you fish it, when you fish it, why you fish it.
Man, those things are amazing. Like people ask me how do you fish them, how do you throw them, and it's kind of like a spinnerbait. Something, if you can keep it in your hand long enough, you start just catching fish on them. They definitely shine in the early part of the spring, though. Really, the pre-spawn and dead days of winter.
I like that. Pre-spawn, not pre-spawn, not the window that everybody considers pre-spawn. That 55 to 60 into 62 degree water temperature when they're truly pre-spawn is what a lot of people call pre-spawn. But some people call the entire period pre-spawn. It's not incorrect, but I like to say that too, pre-spawn, that pre-spawn where they're really feeding up and they haven't even started to think spawn yet. The photo period hasn't changed. So that, mid 40s to low 50 degree water temperature, it is, I got to sit back and watch this guy, and Eric Siddiqui, another one of the top sticks on the KBF deal, and we'll cut to some of that footage to show you guys them catching fish on it and kind of what they were talking about, and not just a static couple of guys talking, but actual fish in hand with these lures. But he and Eric sat there and laid the smack down on it. I don't carry those baits, right? I'm kind of a snob when it comes to that type of fishing, and to me, they're so deadly effective that they're almost too easy. Does that make sense at all? It's kind of like fishing a Senko sometimes. It just gets to where it's so easy it's boring. But I legitimately was still recovering from going to the hospital. I couldn't be super active. And I said, hey man, do you mind letting me borrow one of those baits? He gave me the lure. I tied it on. And I'll be honest, I was just going to be lazy, and because I couldn't really fish that effectively, I had a weight limitation on how much I could pick up and carry and how long I could be in the kayak and all that good stuff. But you handed me that lure. I tied it on, I threw it out, and I turned the torpedo on, and I trolled about 50 feet to this. It's really a ridge more so than a ledge, all right? And a ledge is a hard edge that drops off. A ridge drops off on both sides, and I think that there's a distinct difference between the two. But we're in a pocket that they don't spawn in, but the shad move up in there before they work their way up the creek, and they stage there, and they hang out in these big bait balls. And I just threw the bait out, set the speed just about right, that 1.4, 1.5 knots, where I've generally caught fish trolling. I'm not a big troller, but I do know how to do it. Throw the bait out, and I troll across this hump and caught like a 7-pounder. Fish for 20 minutes. And I knew that you guys were tournament fishing that spot the day before, so I left it alone. So during the tournament, I didn't mess with it at all. But as I was paddling around and as I was watching them fish, and I noticed that they were solely focusing on the bait ball, I decided, man, this ridge over here has got to be where these fish, that are these bigger fish, are staging, because one day the bait was in the cove, the next day it was outside the cove, and I'm thinking, well, the big fish are just gonna lay up on this ridge, and whichever way the bait moves, they're gonna murder them. And that's exactly what produced that fish. But they can be deadly effective. So look, you got the Jean LaRue, you got the Biffle Bug, you've got the Accent spinnerbait, you've got the G-Worm, you've got your umbrella rig. Are there any secrets to how you set your umbrella rig up, or which one in particular do you think is what's your go-to?
Mine's the Harvester rig, but it's mainly just because, like state laws, I'm from Arkansas, so we can put 26 hooks on an A-rig, and people regularly do.
They can hook an A-rig to an A-rig, and you're fishing like a chandelier.
It's pretty crazy. You catch more fish on them too. I mean,
so what bait? So that's the Harvester. That's from Hog Caller, right?
Hog Farmer.
Sorry about that. It's a hog collar too. I promise you.
Yeah.
All right. So what else is in that bag? We're rounding this thing out now. We got 4. Is that 4?
Yep, 4.
So let's just go ahead and make it your top 5. What's your next thing? What are you going to finish out? You know, the Kodiak brown bag fishing tip, the top 5 successful lures for fishing throughout the season or fishing the spring. What's the last one?
It would have to be the Z-Man jackhammer. And unlike most people, I probably never actually caught a limit on that, but there was several tournaments where like my 21 came on that, or my 5-pounder came on it that day. But
can I say what I think it is?
Yeah.
I think the jackhammer is your best first fish and last fish bait.
Yeah.
Meaning it's a good bait to get out there and get confidence in. But once I catch them on that, I really want to slow down, be more methodical, or I want to, switch it up. And generally I'll go to a square bill, I'll go to a swim bait, I'll go to something that I can move a little easier through the entire water column, because I'm a power fisherman. And when I'm power fishing, it's maddening for me to throw a jackhammer out there and take it, 15 minutes to get to the bottom in 12 foot of water. So I'll switch it up. I'll find one on it, but after I've found one, then I would generally go to something, like a salt body swim bait that I can rig with a heavier weight and get it to the bottom and stay in the strike zone longer. But the reason I say it's the last fish bait is once I've caught a limit and I'm trying to upgrade, that bait just flat out, it just whispers in Fat Girl's ears. Yeah. It says, hey, psst, hey. So when it comes to fishing the jackhammer, how do you fish it?
Kind of like a rattle trap. I don't really.
Do you ever think about stuff like that? I was just talking about, like talking to the fish, like what the lure says to the fish.
Yeah, I'm usually meaner.
You're a visualizer. Yeah, okay. Nice. All right, sorry. So back to how do you fish a jackhammer?
I kind of like a rattle trap. A lot of times I'll let it in. Grass would be an exception, but I like letting it hit the bottom and ripping it up and getting the flutter and it hitting the bottom again and getting the flutter and it hitting the bottom. Because the biggest thing, the difference between the jackhammer and the original chatterbait is that knocking sound. So the more, if I really think they're biting or they're feeding, they will come to that sound as if they're around it. So it's like I want to make it as loud as I can, not just a steady reel of the chut 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 chut. Like I want to make it talk,
Yeah, because all the chatterbaits are going to put off a thump, but you're right. What the jackhammer does is it puts off a higher pitch and the lower pitch thump and the higher pitch knock. Man, I'm gonna tell you something that I've been doing, and I hate to hijack your tips video, but I'm in it too. But I've started threading or working a oversized split ring onto the shaft between the tie and the blade, and so you've got the standard jackhammer, but then you got this jingle, this tick, this clicking of the oversized. And man, I don't know if it makes a difference, and maybe you can comment on this. Some of these little modifications we all do to lures, I don't know 100% if it's doing more for the fish, but when you catch a fish on it and it builds your confidence in it, because we started this off, you said confidence lures, which is what led us to do this video. But there's little modifications like that. Like I'm a big fan of a Zaco on a a trailer on any chatterbait, and especially on the jackhammer, because I have a lot of confidence in throwing a jackhammer out, letting it hit the bottom, like you said, but I also fish it just like a jig, and then on the fall and on the retrieve, I'll fish it like a jackhammer. So when I've got that tail on there that stands up, that's got a little more buoyancy to it, and it adds a little slower fall when I'm just letting it fish on the fall, it just gives me more confidence that it looks natural, adding some volume to the skirt. But I also do these little tricks and little tweaks and things that, again, maybe they don't do anything for the fish, but in my mind they do, so therefore I'm more confident in it. Do you find that confidence is a big part of this whole thing?
Oh, absolutely. And it kind of, one of my little confidence deals with the Zaco, because I really like it a lot too on a jackhammer.
Do you think it's Zaco? I think it's Zaco.
I don't know.
I need to call Gary and get a ruling, because you say Zaco, I say Zaco, Richard Penny says Zaco. I don't know. We'll find out. I think Dwayne
Taft says Zaco too.
Dwayne Taft says Zaco? We'll have to find. You guys do me a favor and type it out in a pronunciation format. How do you say Zaco, Z-A-K-O, or Zaco? And how do you say Ico? Because what do you say for the Eco? Is it Eco or Ico?
I don't know.
You've never seen that? Oh my gosh.
It's the little grub.
It's like a grub, but it's got a hula tail at the top.
I've always called it like the Fat Ike.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, so confidence. What do you do?
The one thing I do with Zacos or Zacos that I think helps a lot, they don't really actually move all that much. I mean, they do move, but it's so tight. It's really good. I mean, it looks like a bait fish. But what
I like about it is it creates air bubbles as it moves, and it kicks them off, and it really collapses that air pocket, which creates clicking in the water, if you understand how bubbles work. But yeah, you're right. Once it tightens up, it really isn't a lot of movement.
I will dip just the tails that stick out on the top and bottom, and it gives it more of a contrast to the movement that it has.
You know what I think that does? And this is back to confidence. When I dip the tails, I think what it does is it attracts bait fish. The bait fish are swimming behind it, picking at it. So now your lure that you're fishing is an Alabama rig. You know, it's a whole school of fish swimming along. They're picking at it. When I feel that picking at the back of a bait, I'll sometimes leave one strand on a spinnerbait longer. God, I've never talked about this. I'll use one strand longer, and I promise you, brim will swim behind that thing picking at it. So now you're fishing a brim-colored spinnerbait, and 5 brim are following it. And when those bass take off, those brim scatter, and yours is the slow gazelle that's left to get murdered. And all right, so anyway, finish it up. What color tip?
Usually it's orange.
Orange?
Yeah, because I usually try to imitate a brim when I'm throwing a chatterbait, mainly. I mean, you can throw the white ones too, but
you know what? I love orange. You are not going to get me to say it, but I say anything bad about orange. But the other color that I get a lot of love out of, and again, it could just be a confidence thing, because I know below 8 feet it pretty much is supposed to disappear. But blue, I see a lot of times, especially if brim are eating a lot of crawfish, the tips of their tails turns really like this bright blue. So I really love to tip it with blue, and then sometimes I'll even get crazy and I'll dip it with orange first, and then I'll just barely dip the orange into blue, and I get this orangey blue pearl, orange pearl. Woo. But yeah, so that color thing is a confidence builder for you. I like it. All right, so what's the last thing, if you were going to say to somebody about lure selection, that you could leave them with as a parting shot, and then we'll get on out of this video and let them go back to fishing instead of watching us talk about it?
Probably the last thing I would say is just, and it goes back to everything, throw something you have confidence in and at least is similar to the forage year round. Whether it be matching the bottom, whether it be a contrast to the bottom, something you believe in and can take to the water and do well is what I would say.
So how do you build that confidence?
By catching a lot of fish. Go into Florida. Go in somewhere where there aren't a lot of fish.
There you go. And I tell people all the time, if you've never caught something on a lure that everybody else catches them on, don't do anything but take that lure for 2 to 3 weeks so that you can build your confidence in it. Once you've got confidence in it, you'll know when, where, how, and why to fish that lure, and it'll make you a better angler. Well, Cody, thanks, brother. This is your 2018 KBF Angler of the Year, making a hard run at being the first ever back-to-back Kayak Bass Fishing Angler of the Year. His social media handles are Kodiak, so at Kodiak on Instagram. You can find all of his other stuff there. We'll link it all up in the description box. Go follow this guy. Live vicariously through his adventures, or get out there and compete against him at a KBF trail this year, and give him a run for the money for Angler of the Year. He's only got 1 tournament so far, so you're not too far behind, and only 3 count. So you guys consider joining KBF, getting out there and fishing. It'll make you a better angler. You'll meet some awesome anglers like this guy right here. Go give him a follow. Smash that thumbs up video. Smash that thumbs up button if you like this video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and do us a favor and leave a comment. Takes a little bit of effort on your part, means a whole lot to us, and we'll have this guy back for some more videos. Thank y'all. See you in the next one.